A silver missile model stood on a marble pedestal in the front lobby of Sentinel Defense Systems. The warhead was removed. Inside, circuitry, colored wires, a red timer blinking 3 minutes 58 seconds. SWAT retreated to the doors. The EOD lead shook his head and backed away with them. Aurelia Vance stood 10 paces off. Silk dress, red lipstick. A man in a janitor's coverall pushed his mop cart to a halt. Aurelia laughed at him, sharp and cold and contemptuous. "Defuse this bomb and I'll be yours, janitor." The man set down his broom. He knelt beside the bomb. The janitor opened the lower compartment of his mop cart and laid out 3 things on the polished marble. A utility blade, a roll of electrical tape, a bobby pin he had picked up off the floor that morning. A SWAT officer leveled a rifle at his back and shouted at him to stand down. Aurelia screamed at the janitor to move away from the device. He did not turn his head. 3 minutes 40 seconds, he said, his voice flat in a way that did not belong in a lobby with a bomb in it. "Does anyone in this room know the SX-9 fuse line?" The room went still. SX-9 was a classified Sentinel program. It had never been confirmed to exist outside a sealed wing on the 14th floor. Aurelia's contemptuous smile was still half pinned to her mouth, but her eyes had changed. The arrogance was gone. What replaced it was a single question she could not say out loud. "Who are you?" The janitor worked like a musician reading a familiar score. 3 nested casings came apart in his hands. A decoy circuit was identified and bypassed. A thermal trigger lead was lifted clear and set aside. He narrated each step under his breath, almost to himself, as if teaching someone who wasn't there. The timer read 1 minute 12 when he reached the 2 blue wires. They were identical. Same gauge, same sheath, same length. He paused for half a second. Then he cut the left. The timer froze at 47 seconds. The lead EOD officer exhaled audibly from the doorway. 2 SWAT operators lowered their weapons by an inch. No one moved. The man at the back of the room with the captain's bars on his collar slowly took his hand off his sidearm. The janitor stood up, brushed off his knees and picked up his broom. Aurelia took 1 step toward him. Her legs gave out beneath her on the marble. She caught herself against nothing and her shoulder hit the floor. The janitor reached her in 3 strides. He lifted her with 1 hand under her elbow, walked her to a leather bench against the wall, and set her down without ceremony. Then he turned, took hold of his mop cart, and pushed it toward the corridor at the back of the lobby. "What is your name?" Aurelia called after him. He did not turn around. On the 17th floor, in a small surveillance office that smelled of cold coffee, Marcus Thorne watched the live feed from the lobby camera. His face had gone the color of paper. He watched the janitor's back move past the security desk, past the elevators, and out of frame. Thorne reached for his phone, then stopped. He put the phone down on the desk and stared at the blank screen for a full minute. Then he picked it up again, scrolled to a contact saved only as a string of numbers, and let his thumb hover over the call button. He did not press it. In the employee lot behind the tower, the janitor sat down in a Chevy from 2008 that had seen better roads. He placed both hands on the steering wheel. He did not start the engine. For 90 seconds, his hands stayed exactly where they were. Then they began to shake. Not from fear. He had stopped being afraid in a Mosul alleyway 9 years ago and had never quite started again. This was something else. This was the body remembering what the body had promised it would not have to do again. He sat in the car until the shaking stopped. He took 6 minutes to breathe through it, the way an old army medic in Bagram had taught him, in for 4 and out for 6 and again. Then he started the engine and drove home through streets that were starting to fill with morning traffic. By morning, the lobby footage had moved through every secure terminal in the Sentinel Tower. The legal department had locked the file behind 2 firewalls and a non-disclosure order, but a junior accountant on the 11th floor had already filmed his own screen with a personal phone and posted the clip to a private forum. By 9 in the morning, the hashtag janitor bomb had crossed 600,000 views. Aurelia walked into the IT department before anyone else had finished their first coffee. She did not sit down. She told the systems administrator to pull the night shift custodial roster. There was 1 name on it for the previous evening. Beckett Halloran. Subcontracted through a third-party cleaning company called Bluegrass Sanitation. Social security number on file. An address in the 5 Points neighborhood. No criminal record. No flagged credit. The military service field on his intake form was blank. Aurelia closed the file and dialed an internal extension that did not appear in any company directory. Colonel Dwight Ramsey was the Department of Defense liaison permanently posted at the Sentinel Tower. He had an office on the 21st floor that no Sentinel employee was allowed to enter without escort. He had served 28 years in uniform. He had buried more men than most chaplains. She asked him one question over the line. "Is SX-9 a real program?" Ramsey was silent for 5 seconds. "You shouldn't ask that question on this phone," he said. "Big Spring Park. The bench by the duck pond. 1 hour." The bench was empty when she arrived. Ramsey came across the grass from the parking lot, in civilian clothes, carrying nothing. He sat down a foot away from her and set a small flat object on the wooden slats between them. It was a military identification tag, metal, the color of brass that had spent years in someone's pocket. Aurelia picked it up. The front read, Halloran, B MSG 0341 EOD. She turned it over. 2 raised silver stars had been pressed into the back of the tag. "The man who walked into your lobby yesterday," Ramsey said quietly, "was the team leader of my explosive ordnance disposal element in Mosul. He defused 47 devices in 14 months. The 48th one went off, not because he made a mistake, because someone with a remote detonator pressed the button 6 seconds early. His second-in-command died on the spot." Halloran filed his discharge paperwork from the hospital the next week. Aurelia held the tag in her palm. It weighed almost nothing. "Then why," she said, "is a master sergeant out of Delta Force mopping the floor of my building?" Ramsey gave a small shrug that was not unkind. "Because his wife died of cancer 4 years ago. Because his daughter needs medical insurance and the cleaning company offered a plan. Because he promised Lena, before she went, that he would never touch another bomb." He stood up. "I never gave you that tag, Miss Vance. I never had this conversation." He walked back across the grass. Aurelia sat on the bench for 30 minutes after he was gone. Her thumb moved over the 2 silver stars again and again. The word she had used the day before came back to her with a clarity that made her throat close. Janitor. She had said it the way her father used to say the word secretary. She felt shame for the first time in a long while, and it took her breath away in a manner she had not expected. That evening she drove to the address printed on Beckett Halloran's intake form. A small craftsman house in 5 Points with a yellow porch light. Through the front window she saw him sitting on the living room floor with a girl of 8 or 9, glasses too big for her face, both of them folding paper cranes from a stack of bright squares. The girl laughed at something her father said. The sound came faintly through the glass. Aurelia stayed in the car. She did not knock. She drove home with the metal tag still pressed inside her closed hand. The next morning, Aurelia ordered Beckett brought to the boardroom on the 22nd floor. He arrived in his blue coveralls. He had not changed. The plastic name badge clipped to his chest still read, Halloran, B. Night Custodial. Thorne was already seated at the head of the table, his suit pressed, his expression arranged into something between amusement and warning. 3 of his loyal directors flanked him. The full board was not present. It did not need to be. "Mr. Halloran," Thorne began, with a small, performed smile, "are you aware you interfered in an active federal crime scene?" Beckett did not answer him. He looked at Aurelia. Aurelia stood up. She walked around the long glass table and placed the metal identification tag on its polished surface between herself and Beckett. He looked at the tag for 5 seconds. Then he reached out, picked it up, and slid it into the chest pocket of his coveralls. "You shouldn't have this," he said. Aurelia's voice had lost the cold edge from the day before. "I want you to come on as a security consultant for Sentinel. Salary at your discretion. Full benefits for your daughter." Beckett shook his head once. "I'm a janitor. I signed that contract 3 years ago. I'd like to keep it." Thorne broke in, his voice climbing. He turned to the door and called for the floor's security detail. Aurelia raised one hand without looking at him. "This is my decision," she said. The temperature in her voice was 30 degrees below where it had been a minute before. Thorne sat back. Beckett stood up. He nodded once to Aurelia, neither warm nor cold, and walked to the door. At the door he stopped. He did not turn his body, only his head. "The device yesterday used an SX-9 fuse," he said, loud enough for every chair in the room. "That fuse line has not been cleared for production, which means it was moved out of the secure wing of this building by someone with credentials. You should start looking there." He walked out. Thorne's color drained. He recovered quickly. He told the room that this entire matter fell under board authority, not the chief executive's. and that the federal investigation would be handled through his office. Two of his loyal directors murmured agreement. Aurelia watched the door close behind Beckett. She did not respond to Thorne. She did not sit back down. That evening she did not drive home to the house in Hampton Cove. She drove to Big Spring Park, parked in the public lot, and walked to the same bench where Ramsey had given her the tag. The water was dark. A few late joggers passed behind her. 20 meters down the path, a Chevy from 2008 was parked under a street lamp. Beckett was waiting in the driver's seat for his daughter's Saturday paper folding class to let out from the library across the street. Neither of them turned to look at the other. Both of them knew. The library doors opened. Wren came out at a run, a folded crane in each hand, her glasses sliding down her nose. Beckett got out of the car and lifted her, said something low against her hair, and she laughed and pointed at one of the cranes and explained something at great length. He buckled her in. He pulled out of the lot without looking back at the bench. Aurelia sat very still. Then she put her face in her hands. Her shoulders moved twice. She made no sound. It took her 3 days, working from a private terminal that only she and the auditor had keys to count the missing fuses. 14 units of the SX9 line had been removed from the secure R&D vault over the past 2 years. Each removal was documented. Each form was signed by Harlan Vance, chief executive and chairman of the board. Harlan Vance had died 3 years ago last March. Aurelia had buried him herself on a cold afternoon in Maple Hill Cemetery with the rain coming sideways. The signatures on the requisition forms were forgeries, competent ones, done by someone who had practiced the loops and the closing flourish until they could do them in a single unbroken motion. That same evening, a junior fabrication technician named Eli Park appeared in the underground parking garage as Aurelia was unlocking her car. He was 26 years old, of slight build, and his hands would not stop moving. He pressed a small black USB drive into her palm and would not meet her eyes. "Don't open it on a Sentinel machine," he said. Then he walked away. He was out of the city before sunrise. The address on his employee file no longer answered the phone. His mother in Pasadena told the answering service that she had not heard from him in 2 days and that she would not be giving out his number. In the morning, Aurelia plugged the drive into a laptop she had bought in cash at a strip mall. The folder contained 11 months of email correspondence between Marcus Thorne and a defense brokerage registered in Dubai. The subject line on most of them read SX line inventory liquidation. She called Beckett up to her office. When he arrived, she stood up and walked around the desk. She did not sit in the chief executive's chair. She sat in the visitor's chair across from him and turned the laptop so the screen faced him. He read in silence for almost 5 minutes. When he closed the laptop, he did not look at her right away. "The device in your lobby was not aimed at this building," he said. "It was aimed at you. They wanted you in that lobby on that morning. They wanted you to die before you started counting fuses." Aurelia put her hand flat on the surface of the desk to steady it. "I won't take a consulting salary," Beckett said. "I don't want one. But I will keep you alive long enough to do what needs to be done." "Why?" she said, quietly. He looked out the window of the 22nd floor, not at her. "Because you didn't let security shoot me that morning." He stood and left. Aurelia sat in the visitor's chair for a long time. The chief executive's chair behind her, with its high back and the city skyline behind it, looked suddenly like a piece of furniture from someone else's house. That night, when she left the tower at nearly 11, the Chevy was parked across the street, 50 meters from the lobby doors. It pulled out behind her sedan as she turned onto Memorial Parkway. It followed her all the way through Hampton Cove. It stopped at the curb opposite her front gate. She watched the headlights from the upstairs window. They did not move. They stayed there until 5 in the morning, when she finally fell asleep with the curtains still parted. There had been no message, no call, no acknowledgement, only the shape of him, between her and the dark. 3 days later, her personal phone, the one whose number had never been printed on a business card, lit up with a text from a number it did not recognize. "You are going too far." She read it twice. She deleted it. She told no one. That evening she worked late. At 9:10, she rode the elevator down to the B2 garage. As she stepped out, the overhead lights cut off in a chain along the ceiling, one bank after another, until the only illumination came from the red exit sign above the stairwell door. She heard the soft slap of a shoe on concrete. 2 men in dark clothing came around the back of her car. One held a length of pipe. The other had a folding knife open in his right hand. Beckett came out from behind a concrete pillar without making any sound at all. He carried nothing in his hands except an empty plastic water bottle. He used it once, against the wrist of the man with the knife, in a strike that did not look hard enough to do what it did. Then he used his elbow, his knee, the heel of his palm, the edge of the bottle, the floor. 40 seconds. The pipe rang against the concrete and rolled away. The knife skittered under a parked van. One man lay curled around a broken wrist. The other did not move at all. Aurelia stood with her back pressed against the driver's door of her car. She was breathing hard. Her hands shook visibly. Beckett took her elbow and steered her into the driver's seat himself. "Drive to my house," he said. "Not yours. Don't turn your phone on. Don't stop at any lights you don't have to." She drove. The house, in 5 Points, was warm and smelled of toast and crayons. Wren was already asleep on the upper bunk. Beckett made tea in a chipped white pot and set a mug in front of Aurelia at the small wooden kitchen table. He pulled an old gray flannel shirt off the back of a chair and put it around her shoulders. She had not known her hands were cold until they touched the mug. He sat down across from her. He did not say anything. "The thing I said that morning," she said finally. Her voice was so quiet it almost did not carry. "Defuse this bomb and I'll be yours, Janitor. I am sorry. I thought I was going to die. I chose to be cruel instead of afraid. I don't know why I did that." "You run Sentinel," Beckett said. "You don't have the option to beg in front of your own security team. I did not hold those words against you in that moment. I am not holding them against you now." He turned the mug a quarter turn on the table, an absent motion. "I have been spoken to worse than that by people who meant it. I knew you did not mean it. I knew it the second you said it." "How did you know?" "Because the people who mean it don't look at you. You looked at me. You were trying to keep your voice steady. You picked the cruelest sentence you could find because you needed to hear yourself still in control of something. That isn't contempt, that is fear with a uniform on." Aurelia set the mug down very carefully. The silence after stretched 5 minutes. Neither of them tried to fill it. A small yellow paper crane sat on the table between them. Wren had left it there for him before bed. Aurelia reached out and picked it up. Her fingers were not quite steady. "You should sleep," Beckett said. "The guest room is the last door on the right. There are extra blankets in the closet." She nodded. She stood. At the kitchen door she stopped. "Thank you," she said. He did not answer. He reached over and turned off the kitchen light. A week later, the joint hearing convened at Redstone Arsenal, in a windowless room with a horseshoe table and uniformed officers from 3 branches seated along the curve. The Department of Defense, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Inspector General's office, and a 5-member quorum of the Sentinel Board were all present. Thorne struck first. He stood in his $1,000 suit, told the room that Aurelia Vance had fabricated evidence to deflect from her own catastrophic mismanagement of the SX-9 program, and demanded an emergency board vote to remove her from the chief executive position. He produced documents and timelines. He spoke for 19 minutes. The room leaned toward him. The Eli Park drive had vanished from the safe in Aurelia's office 2 nights earlier. 2 of the visiting directors had begun nodding before he finished. Aurelia asked for 3 minutes to respond. She did not stand. She did not raise her voice. She called one witness. "Beckett Halloran," she said. Beckett entered through the side door in a plain dark suit. No tie. No decorations. He walked the length of the horseshoe past 2 rows of general officers without looking left or right. Thorne smiled thinly. "And what does a janitor have to testify to in this room?" Colonel Ramsey stood up from the Department of Defense section. He carried a sealed red envelope, which he placed on the chairman's blotter without ceremony. "Under Executive Order 13526, Ramsey said, his voice carrying without effort, "I am here today to declassify the service record of Master Sergeant Beckett Halloran, Unit Designation 0341 EOD, 1st Special Forces, Operational Detachment Delta. 14 years of active service. 2 Silver Stars. 1 Distinguished Service Cross. 47 confirmed bomb defusals in theater. Discharged honorably, June of 2015. The room did not breathe. A 4-star general in the front row stood up. The motion was not loud, but it was clean. The officer beside him stood. Then the next. Then the entire defense section was on its feet. 15 uniforms come to attention, hands at their sides, faces forward. Thorne sat down very slowly. The color left his face in a single sheet. Beckett did not acknowledge the room. He laid a small dark object on the table in front of the chairman. It was the SX-9 fuse he had pulled from the bomb in the Sentinel lobby and kept. He spoke for 10 minutes. He read out the 6-digit serial number. He named the production batch. He named the date of the requisition that had moved the unit out of the secure vault. He matched each detail to a line in a Thorne email he had not been supposed to see. He had copied the contents of Eli Park's drive to 3 independent servers on the night Park brought it in, he said, without telling anyone, including the chief executive. The FBI agent in the second row stood up before Beckett finished speaking. Thorne was on his feet, hands behind his back. Before he understood why, he was led out past the standing officers, past the chairman, past the open door at the back of the room. Aurelia sat very straight at the petitioner's table. Her eyes were full, but her face did not move. She looked at Beckett. This time he looked back, the hallway outside the chamber filled with reporters within minutes. Beckett went out through a maintenance corridor at the rear of the building. Aurelia found him 10 minutes later, leaning against the door of the old Chevy in a back lot, hands in his pockets. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "I had to," he said. "It was time." He reached into his jacket and brought out the metal tag, 0341 EOD, the 2 silver stars facing up in his palm. He held it out to her. "Keep it," he said. "This time I'm giving it to you." She took it. She did not say anything. She closed her fingers around it. The next morning, the Sentinel board convened an emergency vote on the chief executive position. Marcus Thorne, under federal indictment by sunrise, no longer held a seat, but 4 of the 11 directors had been his people. They came into the boardroom on the 22nd floor at 8 in the morning with their position already written into the agenda. A vote of no confidence on Aurelia Vance, citing crisis of leadership. Aurelia walked in at 5 minutes before 8. She wore a plain gray suit, no makeup. Her hair was pulled low at the nape of her neck. She carried a single manila folder. Beckett took a seat in the back row of the observers' gallery. He was not an employee. He was not a consultant. He had no official standing in the room. He had come because she had asked him to be in the building. Wren was downstairs in the lobby with Colonel Ramsey, folding paper cranes on the marble bench beside what had been the pedestal where the missile model had stood. The pedestal had been removed. A potted ficus sat in its place. Aurelia presented her plan. A complete restructuring of research and development, with civilian oversight from the Defense Contract Management Agency, full disclosure of the SX-9 program to the relevant Senate committee, termination of the foreign brokerage relationship, recovery of every missing fuse, with a 6-month deadline, resignation of any director who had received Dubai correspondence and failed to report it. The opposition struck back. "You allowed a janitor to access federally classified material." Aurelia did not pause. "I allowed a master sergeant who had been declassified by the Department of Defense to access material that belonged to the Department of Defense. That is compliance, not violation." One of the 4 directors smiled in a way meant to be seen. "Are you romantically involved with this man?" Aurelia turned her head slowly, until she was looking at him. "I owe him my life," she said. "The board may call that whatever it wishes." The vote was called. 7 in favor of retention, 4 against. Aurelia kept the chair. The gavel came down. The room rose. Aurelia did not smile. She did not exhale. She stood up, walked around the table, and went out the door. Beckett followed her 3 paces behind. They rode the elevator down in silence. The doors opened on the marble lobby. Aurelia walked across the polished floor to the exact place where the bomb had stood. She stopped there. She looked down at the floor. There was no mark left on the stone. Beckett stopped half a meter behind her. He did not touch her. "I thought I was going to die here," she said. The words barely made it past her lips. "You didn't," he said. "You're standing here today." Wren came running across the marble from the bench. She hit her father at knee height and held on. Then she let go and held something up to Aurelia with both hands. A new paper crane, pale green this time, slightly crooked on one wing. "My dad said you were sad," she said. "This is for you." Aurelia knelt down on the marble. She was in a gray suit on a polished floor in the middle of a corporate lobby, and she did not seem to notice. She took the crane in both hands. She nodded at Wren twice without speaking. Beckett rested his hand once on his daughter's shoulder. Then the 3 of them walked out through the revolving door together. Behind them, the camera shutters began to fire through the glass. A month passed. Sentinel restructured under the active oversight of the Defense Contract Management Agency. Aurelia worked 16-hour days. She did not appear in any society columns. Beckett continued to decline a formal, salaried consulting position, but every Saturday morning he came to the tower, walked the perimeter of the security systems with the head of physical security, and signed off on the previous week's logs. He took no payment. He had agreed to it as a personal favor to Aurelia and to no one else. Wren came with him. She sat in Aurelia's 22nd floor office on the wide glass desk, with her stack of colored squares and folded cranes while her father worked. She liked the light up there. Aurelia began to learn how to fold. Her first attempts were lopsided. The wings did not line up. Wren laughed at her, the unfiltered laugh of a 9-year-old, and took her hands and guided each crease with small, precise fingers. One Saturday in the 3rd week, while Wren had gone down to the cafeteria for milk, Aurelia turned to Beckett across the desk and asked the question she had been carrying for a month. What was she like? Lena. Beckett did not answer right away. He kept folding the crane he had started. She taught English at Grissom High, he said eventually. Sophomore composition mostly. Some senior poetry. She made me promise, after the 48th one, that I would not go back to the work. I kept the promise for 10 years. Until that morning, Aurelia said. Until that morning. Do you feel as if you betrayed her? He set the unfinished crane down on the glass. He looked, for the first time in the conversation, out the window toward Memorial Parkway, toward the foothills beyond the city. No, he said. Lena understood why. She used to say, if I ever broke that promise, it would be for a reason that was worth breaking it for. Was I that reason? He turned his head and looked at her then. He had not done so until now. You were the person I could not let die when I could keep her from dying, he said. He paused. He picked the unfinished crane back up. He folded the next crease without looking. Lena was sick for 14 months, he said. I learned to be very precise about what I could and could not change. By the end, I could change almost nothing for her. I could only hold her hand at the right time and bring her water at the right time. I did not enjoy learning that, but I learned it. Aurelia did not speak. She watched his hands move on the paper. When I saw you in that lobby, he said, I knew I could change it. So I did. Aurelia reached into her jacket pocket and laid the metal tag on the glass between them. The 2 silver stars caught the light. I have kept it on my nightstand every night for a month, she said. I think you should take it back. He picked it up. He turned it over in his hand. He looked at the stars for a long moment. Then he laid it back down on her side of the desk. Keep it for me, he said. I don't need to carry it anymore. You need the reminder more than I do. Wren came back through the office door with a paper cup of milk in each hand, and her chin tucked over the rim of one of them. She came around the desk to her father's chair and tugged at his sleeve. Dad, can Miss Vance come to lunch? I want her to see the crane exhibit at the library. Beckett looked at Aurelia. Aurelia nodded once. She did not say anything. The 3 of them rode the elevator down together. None of them spoke. The silence was not an empty one. 6 months later, the federal trial of Marcus Thorne concluded at the Huntsville courthouse. The jury returned a verdict in under 9 hours: conspiracy to commit murder, trafficking in restricted munitions, forgery of executive instruments. 22 years, federal time, no parole eligibility before year 15. Aurelia walked out of the courthouse with no press around her and no statement to give. She had not used the limousine. The driver had been told to stay at the office. The 2 reporters who had waited on the courthouse steps in the early morning had given up by lunch and gone back to their offices to file from telephone interviews. Beckett was waiting on the bottom step. He wore a gray flannel shirt and jeans. He did not say anything when she came down. He fell into step beside her without asking where they were going. They walked through Big Spring Park. The autumn had turned cold the week before. Yellow leaves were coming off the maples and settling on the surface of the pond. In slow rotating patterns, the wind broke and remade. I am thinking about leaving Sentinel, Aurelia said. Next spring. Letting Ramsey take the chair. He has agreed in principle. To do what? Beckett said. A scholarship foundation for the children of EOD personnel killed in the line of duty. I want to put my own money into it. Most of what my father left me, the rest will come from the company, every year, as part of the settlement. Beckett nodded slowly. He did not look at her. Lena would have liked that, he said. She always said children should not have to grow up without their fathers. She said it more than once. She said it the night before she went. They reached the small coffee shop at the south corner of the park. Ren called it the Dad and Me Cafe. She was already at the outdoor table, folding a new crane out of dark blue paper that was bigger than the others. She ran to Aurelia first. She hugged her around the waist. Then she went to her father and tucked herself under his arm. Beckett pulled out a chair for Aurelia. The motion was small and unconsidered, the kind of gesture a person does without thinking about it. Aurelia noticed. She did not say anything. She smiled down at the tabletop. They sat for almost 2 hours. Ren talked about the origami installation she had been invited to assemble at the children's wing of the city library the following month. She had been given 2 whole walls in the ceiling. She had a list, on a folded sheet of notebook paper, of every color of paper she still needed. She read the list aloud at length. Aurelia copied it onto a napkin in pen and put the napkin in her bag. Beckett listened to his daughter. Aurelia listened to Beckett listening. When they got up to leave, Beckett paid. Aurelia did not argue. On the path back to the parking lot, Ren ran ahead, chasing a brown squirrel that ducked under a bench and would not come out. Beckett and Aurelia walked half a meter apart on the gravel, their breath fogged in the cool air. Somewhere over the pond, a single Canada goose called and was answered. His hand brushed against hers. It might not have been on purpose. It might have been. She did not pull her hand away. They walked the rest of the way to the car like that. They did not speak. They did not look at each other. But their hands stayed touching. A full year went by. Spring came back to Huntsville. The dogwoods bloomed white all along the median of Memorial Parkway. The 14th floor of the Sentinel Tower had a new name carved into the brushed aluminum sign by the elevator bank: Halloran Lena Center for the Children of EOD Veterans. Below that, in smaller letters, a private foundation operating in partnership with Sentinel Defense Systems and the Department of Defense. Aurelia was no longer chief executive. She was chairwoman of the foundation. Her office had been moved from the 22nd floor to a small corner suite on the 14th. The window faced east. In the mornings, the sun came in low across her desk. On the desk, the metal tag with the 2 silver stars, and a worn, pale green paper crane whose creases had softened from being held. Beckett had opened a small repair workshop on the south side of the city, outside the gates of Redstone Arsenal. He taught electronics and small engine repair to veterans coming out of inpatient programs. He did not wear coveralls anymore. He did not wear suits either. Ren was 10. Her installation at the city library had become a permanent fixture. 47 paper cranes hung from the ceiling of the children's reading room on lengths of clear fishing line. Each was a different color. None of them were labeled. One Saturday afternoon in April, Aurelia drove out to the workshop. The bell above the door rang as she came in. Beckett was at the workbench at the back, repairing the circuit board of a portable blood pressure cuff that belonged to a veteran he had been helping for 6 months. He looked up, he set the soldering iron down and wiped his hands on a shop towel. "I bought a house," Aurelia said, "in 5 Points, 3 blocks from yours." He set the towel down. He looked at her longer than he usually did. "Why 5 Points?" he said. "Because Ren said the park there is good for folding cranes outside." And because she stopped. "Because what?" "Because I wanted to." He smiled. It was the first smile of the conversation. It might have been the first one in years that reached as deep as it did. "She's right," he said. "The park there is good." Aurelia walked to the workbench. She set a single brass key down on the wood beside his tools. She did not say anything else. She turned and walked toward the door. At the door, she stopped, the way he had once stopped at the door of the boardroom on the 22nd floor, a long time ago, when neither of them had known yet what was beginning. "The thing I said that morning," she said, without turning, "in the lobby. Do you remember it?" "I remember it," Beckett said, very quietly. "You never held me to it. You never asked." "No," he said, "I never will." Aurelia nodded once. She walked out into the parking lot. She did not look back. She left the key on the workbench. Beckett stood looking at it for a long time. Then he picked it up and slid it into the chest pocket of his flannel shirt, into the same pocket where he had been carrying a small, pale green paper crane since the morning she had first come to the office on a Saturday and learned to fold. Outside the workshop window, the late afternoon sun was settling down over Memorial Parkway. At a park 3 blocks east, on a wooden bench under a flowering dogwood, a 10-year-old girl was folding a crane. Neither of them was in any hurry. This time, they had the rest of their lives.